Thank you so much for tuning in to How Good Can It Get today? I'm Bree Johnson, and we're going to do something a little bit different today. I have a co host today, and we're going to be talking about leadership trends and also what we see coming forward and what really the moment of 2026 and this year may be asking of leaders. And so, without further ado, introducing my co host today, Andrea.
Hi, everybody. I'm Andrea Tessier, and I help people trust themselves. I'm a master life coach. I am an IFS practitioner. I work with visionaries and leaders, really work with the inner blocks that can get in the way of our biggest life and biggest intentions and biggest impact. So, doubt and resistance and perfectionism and people pleasing, all of those things that come up that get in the way that are just hoops we have to jump through is what I get to help really leaders that are doing really important, beautiful work in the world navigate more seamlessly so they can show up and build the lives and create the impact that they came here for. Um, yeah, and in a past life, I was a teacher. I taught internationally for 11 years and then left teaching in 2019. Thank God. Right before everything changed, and have had my coaching practice ever since. So I'm so happy to be here with you, Bree, that we get to co-host this together. And I was like, I'm not the expert today, okay? So I love the co-hosting.
Exactly. This is really a
Mhm.
co-creating conversation. And I think the cool thing is we look forward to 2026 trends and what people are going to be working through, maybe like wrestling with a little bit. I think this shared perspective is going to be really essential because no one has the answers. And I think that's where we start in terms of what 2026 will look like. I think if you had, I like to, when you said your past self, I think back to really any year in recent memory and the ideas that I had about what might happen in the upcoming year, there's always surprises. But for some reason, I think there's an amplification of surprise, uncertainty, volatility, perhaps upheaval, whether it's at an industry level, whether it's
Yeah.
just, kind of making sense of news
Yes.
and things that are happening. There definitely seems to be this acceleration of that. So
Yes.
to the extent possible, talking through this together is going to make the conversation and even the preparation that maybe somebody takes from this even better because nobody's got the answers.
Nobody has the answers. We have, I have my pulse on a few things that are going on based on my clients, based on astrology, to be quite
Mhm.
honest.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, we don't actually know. I think if anything, the world is getting faster and faster. Like time is literally getting faster. Like, how is it December 2025 already? Right?
Mhm.
And and it's getting more tumultuous and crazy out there. So we can't really predict what's going on. But and I think the lens that I want to bring to this conversation is like, what are the soft skills that are going to be needed, right? As we move. I think, my sense is that it is much more of like a feminine leadership that's being called forward. And like, what are those soft skills that are going to be needed as we feel into this uncertainty?
Mhm.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The feminine skills, and I think the way that offsets, like, I think of a yin yang, and so as things are accelerating, getting faster, there's more chaos, especially with technology and some of the wild, wild
Yes.
west that's happening there that's impacting if you're, when we maybe I'll pause and talk about who when we refer to leaders who we're talking about, I think it can
Mhm.
be business owners.
Yeah.
We're talking to the leaders who are leaders of their homes, leaders
Yes.
of their family ecosystems, leaders of teams, of departments, of organizations. It really, from the micro to the macro.
Mhm.
But I think a through line is the way that if someone is a leader in business technology,
Mhm.
and so what is the yin yang to this acceleration is the way, and this is what we're going to be talking about, is how do you come back home to yourself? That's the way I think through that,
Mhm.
and my own flavor of this is through nervous system regulation. It's through
Mhm.
self discovery. It's through
Mhm.
different support scaffolding that
Yeah.
despite the uncertainty of what events may occur in the given year, it's still building that rootedness that allows you to remain sort of solid despite all of the changing winds and the
Yes.
uncertainty.
Yes. And I would add to that, like the nervous system work that you mentioned and like the emotional regulation, like the communities that we're building to support us.
Mhm,
That's part of where our collaboration has like come from. Is like I had to really radically look at my work, my business, how I was like self-leading, right? Not just
mhm,
leading my clients or leading my business. How am I leading myself? And I realized like I want more community. I want more collaborations. That's how I actually want to grow my business and to serve others is through my personal relationships. And so when I approached you a few months ago, like, hey, do you want to do more things together? Because we've done other things in the past, right? We
mhm.
met for anybody who doesn't know, we met on like a online like matchmaking for podcast guests like service. And I was on your podcast probably what, like 2 years ago?
Yeah,
A year
you're
and
at
a half?
least a year and a half. Mhm,
Yeah. And that's where we first connected. And there was a vibe and there was a lot that we had in common and a lot of overlap and a lot of like difference. And since then
mhm,
we've had a lot of opportunities to like reconnect as well, right?
mhm,
And so
mhm,
that's like an energy that, brought me to you again here to be like, hey, let's do a thing together. And stay tuned, everybody. At the end, Bree and I are putting something together for the new year that we are going to tell you about first here. So stay tuned.
Yes,
But I
listen to
think
the end, please.
so you can be
Mhm,
the first to know. But I think it's also this energy of collaboration and like building our network so that we don't have to go through the uncertainty of 2026 and beyond, like in a silo.
mhm.
Because it
I
is
mean
lonely at the top, quote unquote, right? It is lonely when we are leaders. And so, who can we be building bridges with so
mhm,
that we have the safety of that, like, safety net?
mhm. I think the building of the safety net is such a beautiful way to describe it, and I also one of the reasons that you and I have worked together, and there have been moments of using your expertise in some of my very important client relationships because it has been so expansive for me,
Mhm.
internal family systems, and when I think about parts work and uh, I think the way, one of the facets of a safety net is following the things that enable and allow expansion of ideas, expansion of community, expansion of just those little glimmers, which maybe seem
Yeah.
small in the micro, but really they can open bigger doors. And that's what this collaboration is all about, is open bigger doors into in many ways how we are better together, and that's the strengthening and the tightening of that safety net that
Mhm.
happens. And not only
Yeah.
is our work better together, but really the connectivity between you and I and how at least I feel in my work feels better together.
Yes, yes. And I'm a generator in my human design. So it's like my strategy is to respond. So it's
Yeah.
actually better for me to be around other people so that I have something to respond to. Otherwise, I'm kind of just making things up in my head.
Yes. Agree. Manny Jen here, two responders. We get
Yeah,
it.
good.
Mhm.
Perfect. So what do you see as trends for
Mhm.
2026? What's coming up in leadership for people?
So the biggest thing, I already mentioned technology, and I think that that is in some ways, yes, it's accelerating, it's creating massive ruptures in business that people, frankly, are, I'll say, ill-equipped to handle, but I think it's just the felt experience of feeling ill-equipped, like feeling that as though the market forces are unique, and in some ways they are,
Mhm.
um, but so unique that I think people have this feeling of floundering.
Yeah.
I see that in a lot of sort of my client work. I see it in the headlines.
Yeah.
There's just this really big disruption,
Mhm.
and in response to that, I think the other trend is a grasping at straws
Mm.
externally.
Yeah.
It's like this, if only I read enough, if I think hard enough, if I
Mhm. Mhm.
um, light my hair on fire to keep
Mhm.
others warm, maybe I will come to the solution. And
Mhm.
so it's maybe loosely could be called kind
Yeah.
of the work wound of burnout, but it's
Yeah.
something very precise that burnout doesn't cover, which is this really intense feeling of needing to arrive at a solution. But I think the real trend is that there are not
Mhm.
yet concrete solutions to the problems being presented by the tech changes and the industry changes and the things
Mhm.
that are happening.
Yes. Yeah, there aren't. And so there's no way, it's very hard to predict what's happening. And, just to, I'm not an astrologer, but even to bring like the astrology lens, which I think is really important. There's actually like wisdom in the stars, not to get too woo woo, but we actually have like a little bit of a map if we're willing to lean in. And
Mhm.
people that are reading the stars and the pulse that I'm gathering from, people who do this professionally for decades is like they're because planets are going direct again, because there is this like being coming through the atmosphere called 3I Atlas right now that is like apparently just this like love being. People are calling it a comet, other people are calling it different things, but the energy behind it is quite loving. So it seems to be that there's this wave of love and clarity and joy and higher consciousness coming in for those who are prepared to receive it, which is very exciting. However, when we go through periods of like ascension like that, when we go through periods of change sort of energetically, it doesn't come with immediate relief. In fact,
Yes.
it comes with a lot of road bumps, right? It comes with a lot of tension because anything that's not really a vibrational match for that is going to be disrupted.
Mhm.
So it's going to be uncomfortable, right? And I'm an idealist. I'm a full yes to like yes, more love, more peace, more ease, more harmony. Let's go. And I don't want to romanticize the truth. Like the world is hurting, right? Families are
Mhm.
torn apart by war. There's still injustice woven into so many systems that were never designed to uplift us. The planet is, groaning under the weight of urgency and extraction. There's polarization happening, right?
Mhm.
And there's fear. And so all of that is also true. And while that's your personal experience or that's the experience of the people that are around you, that causes friction. And
Mhm.
so I don't actually think that 2026 is going to feel easy. Uh,
Mhm.
and so these like softer skills that we're harnessing is like it's really easy to be calm and cool and collected and when everything's going well. It's easy to make decisions when everything is running smoothly. It's easy to lead in integrity when you're regulated. But
Mhm.
like, what if when it's not? Can you still
Mhm.
be as peaceful? Can you still be as calm? Can you still stay in integrity and regulated when everything around you it feels like it's on fire?
Mhm. That
And that
tension point is
go ahead.
oh, sorry. Oh, I was just gonna mark that tension point, I think is what feels so challenging for so many leaders is the tension of I
Yes.
know I can direct I have control. I can direct my attention back to the things that I can control. And so on
Yeah.
one hand, that is available to me. And yet when I see everything else on fire, it's that paradox of what do I do about that? And
Yes.
I think there's even like embedded in the tension this question of is it selfish? Is it,
Mhm.
what does self-preservation,
Mhm.
is that fair when everything else feels so jumbled if I just focus on what I can control or coming back home to
Mhm.
myself? Or is it that I've somehow given up, right? There's this different sense of like, what's now motivating me if I don't have the answers?
Mhm.
How do I carry this burden of the very true reality of the kind of upheaval season that 2025 has been to a degree and may not go away in 2026? How do I
Mhm.
carry that while doing the work to preserve myself.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I resonate so much with the word self-preservation, but like self-leadership, right? How
Mhm,
do I lead myself when everything is going to shit?
yes.
um,
Mhm,
right? And what do we actually do in the face of a world that feels hopeful and heartbreaking at the same time? And
mhm,
I really like I truthfully see this as like a grassroots uprising. That it doesn't actually nothing really changes from the top down, it changes from the bottom up. And so the
mhm,
more of us, just regular old humans doing our life, the more of us that are regulated and peaceful and harmonious and equanimous, that vibration matters. And we
mhm,
can, the more people that are resonating at a higher frequency, I'm getting like really woo woo here.
mhm.
But
I
the
love it.
more that's true, it's like then we have like this critical mass.
Mhm,
And that starts infiltrating to the people around us and then slowly, slowly to the people at the top. That's how I see it going. And so I actually see that being the place of where we actually have a lot of power. We have a lot of power in regulating our nervous system. We have a lot of power in like how we want to move through the emotions that come through our body. We have a lot of power in how we want to make decisions. And we have a lot of power in just how we want to show up in the
mhm,
world. And all of that creates an impact.
mhm.
Mhm.
Absolutely. I
Mhm.
wanna give you a moment if there I kinda went on the trends, and I think you called out
Mhm.
some. Are there any other trends that we haven't talked about that you see present in 2026? And one that visually speaking, I'm not sure if you've seen some of this. I love the woo also. Bring the woo because I think sometimes it gives like a visual or the like a path in a way that, like, can
Yeah.
have people head nodding along that are listening and being like, "Oh, yeah, I have seen that." But the Year of the Horse is the other visual that comes to me, and it's not the Year of the Horse in, like, the dressage or equestrian where it's very, measured and disciplined and kind of following order. I see my Year of the Horse, at least in terms of what I'm seeing come forward, is the bareback holding on gallop, like, "Ah!"
Yes.
But, I
Yes.
wanted to give you space if you have any other sort of trends or themes that you see emerging for the year.
I think it's really going to be a year of like things completing,
Mhm,
right? Things really wrapping up so that we can move forward. So, are there, old ways and old habits and old patterns and paradigms that you've been hanging on to and carrying with you that need to die, that can't go with you, right? Where you're
mhm,
going? It's going to be a year of like things really ending, and endings are painful, right? But the life cycle tells us that after that ending and after that death, there is new life. And so the more we can kind of like gracefully as possible, let go of what is no longer serving us, we can move forward with, the new ways of being that are here. And so I think a trend for 2026 is like more letting go. And so if you've been somebody that's like in the work and you're doing your personal work and you're letting go and you're forgiving and you're doing all the things like amazing, you're in like such a good position to receive this and like
mhm,
don't stop just yet. Right?
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like let that really come to completion so that you can be in receivership of what's next and be part of like leading what is next, showing other people that they can do that too.
Mm,
Mhm.
yes.
Yeah.
So, I think a collective theme we're identifying in this is letting go, loosening
Mhm.
the grip perhaps of control, and yet not, like, releasing the reins fully, kinda to use the Year of the Horse analogy. So if that's what 2026 may be asking more of, what do you
Yes.
think women or leaders need to unlearn first? Or like what's a first foray into going deeper into this work in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, if one of the soft skills that we wanna bring in is our intuition, right?
Mhm.
And I mean, when nothing else is clear, that is our best guidance system, what we have to start letting go of is some of our attachment to like rigidity,
Mhm.
right? Like having like the need to know and have the certainty of what's going to happen. And, I think our intuition is our highest intelligence. It's a guidance system more ancient than logic. And so it's going to be leaning into like, I'm not sure why this makes sense, but like this feels right. Right.
Mhm.
And I get that that doesn't always land in places where you need, data. You need information to back that up. But can the intuition be front facing and then
Mhm.
go and collect the information that you need to like support that? Right. I
Mhm.
think that the leaders that are going to thrive now and in the future aren't going to be the ones with the perfect 5-step plan, but the ones who can kind of like hear that whisper and go, you know what? I don't know why this feels right, but like, I think it's this. And
Mhm.
I think that's going to be really important.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I love, I do think intuition is a skill that it's like a muscle because it's self
Yeah.
trust. And so I just want to tell a quick story about how this looked for me because as you were talking, I was like, oh, this is in part sort of the exercise that I was undergoing in
Okay.
2025. And I want to give,
Mhm.
if you're the type of person listening that says, yes, I want more intuition, I want to make a little room for the fact that it can feel really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so, like, my business and the things that I was pushing forward in Q1 came in so loud and fast and heavy and strong. And I had all this direction in the beginning of the year, just like it was like drinking from a fire hose. And what
Yeah.
happened throughout the year as the year progressed was all of a sudden, because of some family things and we moved, I've talked about this on the podcast, but the things that I thought that I was putting in motion, I put almost universally everything on hold, and that felt at an intuitive level essential because I
Mhm.
really was sort of at the end of my rope in terms of the creativity. And then I spent the summer wrestling with contentment. And every time I felt called to
Mhm.
like, oh, I feel like I need to go do a thing, I would on the
Mhm.
inside be like, stop, release,
Yeah.
presence. I'd look out at my pond and like really try to come back home.
Yeah.
And it was shedding a little bit of that the pace at which I was used to working, the logic which told me that consistency and discipline was the way to results, but it
Yes.
felt incredibly uncomfortable, and it even
Mhm.
then sort of parlayed into the social sabbatical that I took in August that extended all the way to November. I was not on
Mhm.
any social media whatsoever, and that felt hella uncomfortable, but it was like these science experiments that I was running on myself and my
Mhm.
autopilot ways of kind of being and doing to
Yeah.
say, how much louder can my intuition, my intuitive hits, the things that call me on the inside, how much louder can I allow that to be? And what
Mhm.
external to me do I need to shut off to enable that to come online more? And I
Mhm.
wanted to give that example as we were talking about the skill of intuition and this
Yeah.
um, making space for what is true on the inside, what that can look like, and how it can feel really uncomfortable because for me, it was going against all this conditioning that said, do it this way, the logic way. And even seeing other people perform at such different levels, thinking that from a FOMO perspective, I had to do it like them. When in
Mhm.
reality, there's one way. And so, yes, even a business may call or may like be asking for things, but there's a way for an individual, which I loved how you brought that in, is there's still this space to play at an individual level that can kind
Mhm.
of change the frequency and change the availability of intuition that's
Mhm.
still may be available despite, the business numbers or the team leading that might be occurring or whatever is
Yeah.
external.
That's such a good story, like such a great example. And it feels radical, right? It
Yeah.
feels so radical when we're so used to following the strategy, right?
Mhm.
Following the plan. And me
Mhm.
too. And so I really get that. And it's courageous. It's
Mhm.
courageous action to kind of like shift the come from.
Mhm. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think this shift, what I want to, kind of start to talk about is there is this likelihood that to the best of our ability, we can mark these trends, that are an extension of what has happened in 25. And we're seeing that
Mhm.
play out likely in 26 and some of these themes that are going to be present and bring
Mhm.
it into, what we are co-creating and plan to co-create in
Mhm.
Q1 is the coming back home to what's available, creating these spaces and creating it in community
Yeah.
to foster greater like ahas, but also
Yeah.
support because you
Yes.
don't have to do this alone.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. And I mean, when we started kind of brainstorming what's alive and how we want to support each other and support others through this like time, we were calling it a paradox, right? We want to
Mhm.
create a space where we can hold all of it, like all of it. And the pressure to like the integrity. And
Mhm.
when the world is changing so quickly, it's like, how do we want to meet that? And it's an internal strategy. And so I'm so excited about what we've created for people because it's for those women, feminine leaders who are struggling with like, maybe this is how I want to be, this is how I want to lead, but like the external structures don't support this. I see that a
Mhm.
lot in the women that I work with. They're like, I'm fully on board. I'm good. Nobody else is.
Right.
So how do we navigate that? We want to be talking about like what you mentioned already, like unburdening the tired, unburdening the overwhelmed. The way that I see that is through the parts of us that have just held so much for so long, perhaps like presently in your life as a parent, as a leader, but that have historically been holding for you. And there are internal practices through internal family systems, through shadow work that we're going to help people kind of release so that they have the capacity. We want to
Mhm.
talk about how do we make decisions when nothing is clear, right? Getting, offering tools and strategies to like get clarity in the fog and people can start to lead from a place of calm and like an inner knowing of the next step rather than having to know the whole plan because it doesn't exist yet.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's this meeting of, um, I think part of the work is meeting yourself right where you're at, which is this burdened inner pressure place that may be present for you. And
Yeah.
then having the support and the guidance for how do you unburden
Yeah.
that? How do you work through that? What does it look like? And then even, I think one of the things that's going to be really present in our work together is because I find this in myself is even when I have resistance,
Mhm.
even as researched as I am as in nervous system regulation practices or reflection practices or the things
Mhm.
and tools that I know help me to feel better when I feel kind of drawing it above my head, when I feel like I'm, spiraling, in some of this craziness, even though I have this available, I still find that I myself meet resistance in terms of
Mhm.
using these tools to help me. And it's okay, I love when you were talking about the shadow work.
Yeah.
What are some of those blocks and confronting some of those blocks in a safe
Yeah.
space
Yes.
um, while we answer some questions about, okay, what does a different way of making decisions look like practically for anyone? It's going to look different. The way you make decisions
Yes.
as you are sort of unburdening these tired
Mhm.
parts, as you're
Mhm.
working through the shadow parts that may come online in these really, kind of difficult or challenging times, some of that's going to look different, but
Yeah.
it's inviting these skills that you and I see as essential to meeting the moment, the intuition, the
Mhm.
critical thinking, the emotional intelligence, the
Mm.
regulation, the self-leadership,
Mhm.
really inviting those more online from an embodied perspective, and quieting the parts that are not as, and maybe that's not the language you would even use about, I don't, but just quieting the old ways or maybe the traditional ways
Yeah.
of either decision making or working through these challenging things.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I want to be able to offer people like tools to know what to do with that rather than suppressing those parts,
Mhm.
rather than like overriding them. But there are really healthy, really sustainable ways to integrate those parts so they don't hijack the system because resistance is so normal. especially when we're like in really stressful situations. Our old patterns love to come back. And
Uh-huh.
so we practice when things are more calm. We practice when things feel safer. We practice in community where we're held so
Uh-huh.
that we can use those skills when we need them in real life. So
Mhm.
that's something that we want to equip people with in the container.
Mhm. You
Uh-huh.
know,
Yeah.
something that when you were talking that I think is really common, if somebody hasn't been doing a lot of this work or maybe hasn't gotten into a space where they can speak freely about these burden parts, there's
Yeah.
almost this fear, and I've heard it articulated with several of my clients, and I would love your take on this. There's a fear if I open Pandora's box
Mhm.
about just meeting the burden, that pressure point part,
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
and I express, like you said, how hard it feels, how exhausted I am, how tired, then I'm going to sort of get to this. I'm not sure exactly what the fear is there, like what will happen when but that they won't be able to function. There's that
Right.
fear, and so then they don't give themselves and kind of meet themselves. And I
Yeah.
think, I'll just offer my quick sense. I mean, that effectively is what will drive burnout. It will drive the
Mhm.
types of work wounds that are really rupturing in my own experience. The more I don't think ignorance is bliss is kind of my own philosophy on this, but I'm so curious from your
Yeah.
perspective for that person,
Yeah,
what
and
might.
I see that too in my work, and I've also experienced that. Like, oh my gosh, if I go there, what's going to happen? What if I start crying and I never stop?
Mhm.
Like I
Yeah.
still have stuff I need to do in my life. I can't just deal with this. And so that's such a common concern. And I think what's really beautiful about this container is like we're going to balance this. Like it's not just going to be a deep emotional deep dive. There will be space for those parts, but there'll also be space for action and there'll be space for accountability. And so that's true. But anybody that's afraid of that, I've never seen anybody get like stuck and like have a pity party for life. Like
Mhm.
it's just not happened in my last, 6 years of like really holding space for people in their deepest, darkest moments. Every single time somebody's gone to the depths or even just to the surface, there's a sense of relief. Right?
Mhm.
There's a sense of like, "Oh, okay, I have awareness here. Now I can move on." Right? Now
Mhm.
I have choice on how I can deal with this, and then I can move on. It doesn't
Yeah.
become like an endless pit of despair. And so while I can empathize with the concern for that, I've actually never seen it happen.
Mhm. Yes, nailed it.
Yeah.
Actionable awareness is, I think, the output of this work that both you and I do in separate spaces and have seen firsthand with so many of our clients is that when the light is shined on, maybe it's the coping mechanisms, maybe it's the actions or habits that are no longer serving really where they want to go. um, it's the actionable awareness that comes forward that enables them to make a change and to adjust and be like, "Oh, this is the language, at least in my own life, that I constantly use, which is, oh, a prior version of me would have handled it this way." And
Yes.
I call that out more now as a way to say, it's a really cool marker of my growth.
Yeah.
This is how I used to respond to something, and I'm choosing differently now. And I think that's the power of the arc that we envision. And really, the arc that I think both you and I, when we work even with our individual clients too, we go through is like you have to do a little bit of look back or like meeting yourself where you are,
Mhm.
perhaps even a little bit of look back of how did you get to this
Mhm.
place? What has informed you, conditioning, habits, actions? And then we're going to, okay, what's new ways
Mhm.
of handling these inputs, these triggers, these activations, these challenges? So decision making support. And then going to, okay, how do we align with maybe it's if the higher self version or the 2026 version that you really want to cultivate to build
Mhm.
these roots around integrity and self-led leadership and intuition and more of a
Yeah.
flow state that enables and equips you in the season of life that we're in. That's kind of the path that we intend to go through this process.
Yeah. Not just like getting to the dark and staying in the dark, but going there, doing what needs to be done to honor that, and then creating room. Like once we create that space and we release some of those, shadow aspects of ourselves, then we have room, right? We have room for
Mhm.
integrity. We have more room for trust. We have room to expand. We have room to hold more. And yeah, absolutely. That's the arc that we want to create for people. And so maybe Bree, maybe you can name here, like, who is this for? Like, when you think
Mm,
of the woman that like needs to be in one of these like few number of spots, because we've never done this before. We want to keep it small. We want to keep it intimate. We want to keep it high touch. But who do you
mhm,
imagine being here? Just for anybody that's listening, that's like, oh, is this for me?
Yeah, I can the person that I see is someone who has done some of this work. You called it out at the beginning, and I think it's worth repeating, who's done this work solo for a bit, who
Yeah.
has, maybe had whether they call it a surviving or a thriving year of 25, they were kind of in the middle, right? They were making some progress. There was shedding that occurred, roles,
mhm.
expectations. Maybe it was even a job, but they're not quite into the new yet. But they have
Yes.
their eye
Yeah.
on, I want to feel differently
Yeah.
despite the external pressures in 2026. And there's
Yeah.
a confident belief that I can make a change. I think it's that
Mhm.
woman who knows she wants differently, but just might not have the tools
Yeah.
or doesn't have the
Yeah.
community support. Because I
Yeah.
think that's what's really cool is this isn't
Yeah.
necessarily anchored in accountability in sort of the traditional way, but what I have seen in small group spaces is the acceleration of the change and sort of that expansion that you're talking about happens
Mhm.
so much faster when you can kind of share it with others and you're celebrating it, and then there's like this parlaying that happens in a group space that is very unique. So if you don't have the support, I think about the people whose significant others maybe aren't on a growth trajectory, or they don't have
Mhm.
fellow
Yeah,
leaders in their world who are
yeah,
doing these things. It doesn't feel like a safe space yet to, in
Yeah.
those environments. This is the space for her.
Yeah. Yeah. I imagine the woman who's like kind of a big deal, right? In many areas of her life, right? In her own little
mhm,
pocket, right? But
mhm,
she's somebody so she's somebody that holds a lot.
mhm,
She's able to solve for a lot. She uses her heart. Um, but she feels the pressure. Like she feels a
mhm,
lot of pressure for the people around her, both personally and professionally, to make sure everybody's okay.
mhm,
And she really desires like clarity in a season where like things are unclear, where things feel a bit foggy. And she's struggling to create like her own stable
mhm,
ground, right? In a situation that feels like a little bit unsafe.
uh-huh,
And she sort of overrides her intuition, overrides her gut instinct more than she knows she should. And
uh-huh,
she wants, the groundedness. She wants the community. She wants the truth. And
uh-huh,
for that to be kind of like the impetus for how she leads with authenticity, with integrity, with enthusiasm. Yeah,
uh-huh,
that's who I imagine is perfect. So if anybody's like leaning into that and like, "Oh, that's me," you need to get in the room with us.
uh-huh,
We're intentionally keeping this space small. We want it. It's a leadership lab. We really want people to get their hands dirty, and we want to be in it like with you. And so, yeah, if you're feeling this, definitely lean in.
Mhm. Yeah, so the way that we're handling this right now is if what we've been talking about resonates with you, if you feel that pull into what we've been sharing, for now you can just email me bjohnson@bree-johnson.com. You can email me, you can reach out, DM me on social media for a wait list because as Andrea said, we want to keep this a really small space, a very
mhm,
curated kind of intimate feeling to it.
mhm,
And I do anticipate, the spots might go fast. And so if this is
mhm,
something that's really calling to you for Q1, it's a late January start. So you kind of have
mhm,
a sense of where we'll be kicking this off.
mhm,
The vision is every other week. Too,
mhm,
we recognize, again, this is for the busy woman who is
mhm,
already juggling a lot. but it's going to be a really cool space where on your calendar, you're going to block out some time for yourself and your own learning, development, and growth in a new way in a very
Mhm.
small space. In
Mhm.
that this is going to be for you. So if this sounds like something that you want to come into, please reach out for the wait list. And there will be more information to come, but we wanted to give you a preview of some of the things that are top of mind for us for 26 and also what we're developing for you.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, and on that note, I'll just say if this amazing, please message Bree. We definitely want the aligned people that want to be here in these seats with us. And if not, I just wish everybody just a really profound, a really meaningful, a really impactful 2026, whatever that looks like for you. And yeah, I just want to say like what an honor it was to be here for you and have this conversation and start talking trends and themes and how we can meet the uncertainty of 2026 and beyond, like together in community with our hearts.
Mm, so well
Mhm.
said. Thank you so much for
Mhm.
co hosting this episode with
Oh,
me.
fun.
And I hope to hear from some of you. And until next time, I hope you keep on thriving. I hope you are able to set intentions for the year ahead, whatever they are for you. And if at any point you need support, please don't hesitate to reach out.